How's it going, everyone? Today, I wanted to bring you my top 5 decks that I would be bringing to ranked. I really wouldn't touch much else outside of this top 5, and I'm also going to show you the matchup spread of every single deck here. How do they fare in the meta? What decks are they looking to counter or just compete well against? It's still very early in the meta, so things are subject to change. I'll try to do a video like this where I show the matchup spread, show the best decks every single week. Last time I did one of these videos, it seemed like it was a really helpful tool to you guys during your ranked grind. So hopefully this will be the same and will help you make better educated decisions about what decks to bring to ranked. If you guys are enjoying the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Let's get into it. Coming in at number 5 is Flareon Leafeon. And really the only reason why it's here at 5, if we look at tournament results, which are our only way to really quantify how well it does against other decks, this is still a very, very early deck. We just started to see it over the weekend, and this is the first time we've really seen people bring it to a tournament, and it had a decently well tournament breakout. There was another Frog EX tournament, around 300 people, and it took up quite a few of the top 16 placements. So we don't have, like really concrete data on how well it does against other decks, but these early numbers are pretty insane. You'll see when we go over the matchup chart. This deck is a fire-only deck. You do not want to play grass. You get your grass energy from Leafeon. I have seen other builds of this deck that opt for none of the Leaf Cyclone Leafeon, play the Genetic Apex Flareon, which does, I believe, 120 damage for 3 energy. And also they were running like double Sylveon because they just took out a Flareon, took out a Leafeon, and that gave the space for the Genetic Apex Flareon and the second Leafeon, and the rest of the list was pretty much the same, but just going less Leafeon heavy, which is something I can totally understand. You get more consistency through Sylveon and less having to worry about getting this second Leafeon is it's fairly difficult to get set up. You're going to need to evolve into your Leafeon EX first in the active spot to get that grass energy onto the Leafeon. The Genetic Apex Flareon is just a slightly more consistent attacker because you don't require 2 evolutions in order to pull it off, and it also leaves more evolution spots available for Sylveon. This is just a very, very cool deck. You get to play 4 basics essentially, which is something we have never been able to do in Pokemon Pocket before. It's very cool. It reminds me a lot of the real TCG where 4 of counts are the limit, like most other cardboard TCG. I don't know another cardboard TCG that doesn't have a 4 per limit on a copy of a card, but it's just a very, very cool deck, and your opponent will never know what this Eevee is going to turn into. If this Eevee on the bench is about to get you +2 cards, if it's going to become a Leafeon, power itself up with Force Breath, or if it's going to sit on the bench, be a Flareon, start doing Combust and getting the attack up that way. So I really love this deck. I think it's very, very cool. Let's head over the matchup chart. I'll show you why the early numbers coming out are so insane. So here's the matchup spread for Flareon Leafeon in this very early stage. Now, some of these make sense why they're here, why they would be this one-sided. Solgaleo, Buzzwole, Guzzlord, all of these, whether weakness from Flareon or just trading better into the attackers, makes a lot of sense. Silvally Rampardos has also had a very hard time dealing with Flareon Leafeon. Now, if it's Silvally Oricorio, it's a different story. It goes down here to Greninja Oricorio levels, which also makes sense. No matter what one prizer we are playing, they are not the easiest to set up, as I stated earlier, and Oricorio is fairly simple. It's going to wall out the rest of the deck besides those one prizers, and both of the one prize Pokemon can be dealt with just with Greninja, and then you go into the double Oricorio portion of your game plan and you just kind of wall them out. Charizard also makes sense. Charizard gets set up very quickly now with Sylveon. We're seeing a lot of Charizard Sylveon instead of just Charizard, and once Charizard gets set up, that's 150 damage. It's knocking out every single Pokemon in your deck, unless they have a giant cape attached, to which run a Guzma or a Red, and Charizard's going to get around that. Garchomp, it's up here and favored. There were not a lot of games for it. Garchomp is another one of these new decks that just came out, but to me, Garchomp did not have as impressive numbers for me to put it in this top 5 slot. It's right outside of it for me. Now, Sylveon Greninja. Most played deck, most played matchup by far. and it's coming in right now at about like a 57% favored matchup for Flareon Sylveon. So with all of the games that have been played, I can see this one holding, which is very good for the deck. You want a great matchup against this deck because it is absolutely everywhere, and it also just makes sense. Flareon is able to get one-shots or close to one-shots on all of these Pokemon, just missing a damage modifier. Flareon will be able to knock out a Sylveon. It'll be able to knock out the Giratina in return after it comes up and attacks. Early pressure from the Leafeon seems like it would be pretty good for you. You just got to try to avoid the Greninja ping plus Giratina combo on one of your Flareons. Try to go to a double Flareon board state, and you should be able to handle the Giratina when it comes up to attack. Giratina Darkrai is coming in dead even at a 50% matchup, so not much more to say about that. And then of course Flareon is even. But looking at these top decks by play rate, you know, Sylveon, Greninja, Solgaleo, Giratina, Darkrai, these are like the most played decks right now. So to take a either even or favored, slightly favored matchup against them is fantastic. And you pick up a lot of other really good key matchups here that are just 60+% win percentages for you. So seems like a very, very strong deck from these early results. Things could change as more players get their hands on the decks, as deck lists start to evolve. We will just have to see going forward in the future. Number 4, we have Solgaleo. In this formula, this genre of deck that I'm going to be talking about in this number 4 slot, I'm going to talk about the other decks that I consider to be in this same tier as Solgaleo. This is kind of the why are we playing this deck? Once we get over the matchup spread, I will explain more, but this is Solgaleo Shiinotic. You know what it is, you know what it does. We saw it a lot last format, and really the only buff that it gets from this set is Leftovers. Leftovers is going to allow Solgaleo to heal that 10 damage that it does to itself. So kind of a cool synergy there. Solgaleo is going to take 10, and then the Leftovers are going to heal 10. I like that. That's cute. The rest of the list, it's pretty similar to just what we saw last format. Let's get over the matchup spread, talk about the more interesting stuff. This is what I mean by why are we really playing these decks? When you look at the matchup spreads for these decks, they are not good. And the decks that I'm talking about in the same vein are Guzzlord, Silvally Rampardos, Buzzwole. These are decks that have some really good matchups against some really common decks for sure, but then take some really bad matchups against a lot of the rest of the field, and it kind of outweighs the pros of playing the deck. We're going to talk next. The next deck we're going to talk about, and the next style of deck we're going to talk about is, in my opinion, much, much better to run on the ladder than this. It's really just here because this is how a lot of the decks are that are in the top 3. They are these decks that take really not great matchup spreads into the meta. And when you're queuing onto ranked, you know, yes, there are going to be more Sylveon Greninjas. You're going to see more of those than you will like a Garchomp, but they're still out there. You have no protection from these decks like you would in a tournament. Maybe in a tournament you can say, okay, well, the Charizards are not going to do that well. If I can just win a couple games, I won't face any Charizards, or it'll be very unlikely that I run into any Charizards. On the ladder, man, the ladder doesn't care. If you queue into someone who's running Charizard, there's a loss. You queue into someone running Greninja Oricorio, Giratina Darkrai, Garchomp, Flareon Leafeon, like it's just kind of over. It's really, really hard for you to get past that. I don't love these style of decks. Again, those are Buzzwole, Guzzlord, Silvally. These all have more unfavored to slightly unfavored matchups than they do favored matchups. And in an open field like the ranked ladder, I would personally stay away from them. Again, it's just here because there's not that many decks around that I consider really great plays going forward. So coming in at number 3, I have Greninja Oricorio. Now this deck is in the same vein as some other decks that I will talk about more when we go over and look at the matchup spread. This deck, something we're all familiar with. Greninja Oricorio has been a thing for a while, fell off a little bit during last format, but is making a nice resurgence as the meta becomes a little bit friendlier to it. So this deck, it seems like we're now going with the 1 Eevee, 1 Sylveon to boost consistency. You can see this list right here. Just did well at a tournament. double Cyrus like I was talking about yesterday. You do not want to play your Greninja Oricorio decks without double Cyrus. Don't understand it, man. Put that second Cyrus in there for sure. For sure. It's Greninja Oricorio. You know, there's nothing crazy we got to talk about here. It uses Oricorio to wall Greninja, boost some damage. Cyrus brings up whatever we want every single turn. Much more interesting. Let's go look at the matchup chart, and I will explain this sort of genre of decks that we're seeing in this format. Now, this genre of deck I'm talking about are our roulette decks. I prefer Greninja Oricorio out of all of the roulette decks, and by roulette decks, I mean we are taking favored matchups and unfavored matchups, and that is it. We are crushing the decks we are looking to go up against, and we are losing hard to the decks that counter us. Greninja Oricorio is going to wall out the decks that do not have really great answers to the Oricorio, and it's going to lose hard to the decks that do. So, some other decks that are similar to this are like Garchomp EX. Garchomp EX is very, very similar, where it is going to take great matchups to some decks and abysmal matchups to others. I just have never really been a fan of Garchomp. I've never liked playing the deck because outside of it trying to hit these matchups that it really wants to see, it has the added inconsistency of being a stage 2, and sometimes you can lose to those a little bit harder. This deck is very, very simple to get your free wins. Against Solgaleo, just set up the Oricorios. Flareon, Leafeon, not going to take much more than just setting up the Oricorios. You will need a Greninja to deal with whatever 1-point Pokemon they throw at you, but it's fairly simple. Same with Charizard. It's going to be very easy. And Darkrai, Giratina as well. It's going to be tricky for them once you get double Oricorio online. You know, Giratina on the bench, getting powered up, ready to take a big 2-prize knockout whenever you're ready for it. So this is my personal favorite roulette deck. There are other options that sort of fit in that, you know, category. To be honest, there aren't a lot of decks that are even on the playing field and just will get you through by taking slightly favored to slightly unfavored matchups, and it's really your play that differentiates that. We will talk about that for the number 2 and number 1 slot, but for the most part, this list has just kind of been Flareon, Leafeon, which is not quite been figured out if it's really all of that. I kind of have a feeling that it is. Bad deck, sort of, and then these roulette style decks. But yeah, Greninja Oricorio is my pick for the roulette deck. This is the one I would be rocking. Yeah, you guys won. You got it. Number 2, Darkrai Giratina. It's a deck. It's been a deck. And not much has changed. Nothing has actually changed on this set. We're still doing the Nihilego Poison Barb thing. You're still going to run into it. It's going to farm you. Not much you can do about it. Now, on the matchup spread, we see why this deck is so powerful. Super consistent. Takes a lot of fantastic matchups. You take an even matchup with what is the most represented deck in the format, being Sylveon Greninja. Flareon Leafeon seems to also be a even matchup, which is good because, like I said earlier in the video, that deck is on the rise. I feel like we're going to see a lot more of it in the future. And your bad matchups, I mean, it's still Greninja Oricorio, it's still Charizard, and Buzzwole is not even that bad of a matchup for you. So just overall, Darkrai Giratina is in a really powerful spot right now in this format. It's taking down a lot of tournaments, placing very highly in these tournaments. Yeah, it is just a scary deck. Nothing has changed for it. Pokemon Pocket developers, I say we print a card that has an ability that says if it's in the active spot, your opponent's basic Pokemon in play have no abilities. I think that would be sick, not only for a Greninja Darkrai style counter, but just for the game. I love cards like that because I am evil. Not as evil as Giratina Darkrai players, but still a little bit evil, a little bit sinister for sure. My personal favorite deck, best deck for this format at the moment is Sylveon Greninja. Sylveon, it just allows you to do so many plays. It lets you get those Greninjas up and going so quickly. We have the Cyruses. I mean, we're just putting together combo after combo with the Sylveon. Giratina as the big nuke in the back. Just an overall very cool deck. So much draw. Damage ping from Greninja, weave in those 1-prize attackers, don't have to just rely on the 2-point attackers, Giratina to finish off the game, Cyrus for constant deciding, you know, what you're attacking into every single turn. I love this deck. I think it is so cool, and It is a deck that reminds me a lot of Tapu Lele Greninja Giratina, in the sense that this is a deck that takes a lot of even matchups, as we will see, and the thing that's going to elevate you and put yourself ahead of other Sylveon Greninja players is how good you are at the game. So this is definitely one of the more skill intensive decks, because again, it takes a lot of very close matchups, and to navigate those matchups, you just have to be the better player or draw better, which, you know, it's Pokemon Pocket, it happens. Sometimes wins do come down to who drew better, but it is what it is. Yeah, this deck is very, very cool. Let's go over it. Let's take a look at the matchups. And look at this beautiful spread. Favored, Savali Rampardos, Greninja Oricorio, Guzzlord. Slightly favored, Buzzwole. Even, Mirror Match, Giratina Darkrai. Slightly unfavored, Charizard. Unfavored, Flareon, Leafeon, Solgaleo, and Garchomp. Just look at how clean this is. You know, playing this deck, that against most of the meta, look, you're going to hit the same amount of favored to slightly favored to even decks as you are slightly unfavored to unfavored. It is just very, very clean. Now, if you're playing on the ladder and you run into a lot of Solgaleo or a lot of Flareon Leafeon, then it's going to be trickier for you to rank up, get points for sure. But against most of the field, you're going to have a chance. You're going to have a chance against these decks. Even these unfavored matchups, while taking a below 40% matchup is never great, it's not all the way down at like 15%, 20%, like some of these other decks' unfavored matchups are. So it is something that is still doable. It is doable. It doesn't mean you automatically lost. 40% across a lot of games, you know, not too bad. It's just a really, really solid deck into the meta right now. I love it. I think it is. There's no real cheese factor to Sylveon Greninja. You know, it's just doing the same thing every game. And as long as your opponent doesn't completely pop off on you or draws go abysmal on your side, you should be able to navigate yourself to that win. It's just going to be completely dependent on your playing. That's it for the video, gamers. Thank you so much for watching. Have a nice night, morning, evening, whatever. Take care. I'll see you on the next one.